Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer. Welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film, and this is the penultimate Scorsese episode. After months and months, we got this, and then I'll be recording The Irishman with my brother, and then it'll be over. But coming back for, I guess now we have a trio of music docs that Jim has joined on for. But Jim, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, as always, Shane. I kind of thought this was the last one. I'm a little disappointed, but I get that The Irishman that's the one that's been pushed till the end.
Well, there is going to be a special episode because, like, what I have envisioned too, if there's still an active director that I've done on my show, I will have special episodes for like the new releases. And this is a special year because we're getting a Scorsese and a Spielberg this year because Killers of the Flower Moon is going to come out at some point this year. So I'm excited about that. And I will be having an episode especially for that when it releases.
And is Tarantino doing something this year as well?
Not that I've heard. I know there's a lot of directors who are having films coming out this year. Like I know I'm super excited for 2 weeks from now when The Northman comes out from Robert Eggers, which is getting rave reviews from early reactions that I've been seeing. I'm like, this is a $90 million Viking revenge epic, and I'm like, yes.
I'm gonna see it for sure.
Yep.
I'm gonna definitely watch that one.
But how this show works, we have 3 segments on the show where we do some coming attractions for the weekend that we're releasing this episode, and then we have the feature of the week, which is Rolling Thunder Review, a Bob Dylan story from Martin Scorsese, and then some recommendations. But coming out this weekend, which is April 8th, and Jim, what was the movie that stuck out to you most?
So for my coming attraction, I chose Cow, the IFC funded documentary about 2 cows. It's like a day in the life style filming, from what I understand. So I'm guessing one of the cows is going to be like there's got to be some kind of a contrast here. So I'm guessing one of the cows is going to be kind of grass fed, free range kind of thing, and the other is going to be in a slaughterhouse. So I'm prepared to see some grisly stuff, but the concept seems really bold to me, and I'm really curious to see what all the fuss is about, because it has been nominated for a whole bunch of awards, most notably a BAFTA, right?
Yeah, and because it's a UK film, and especially if IFC's involved, generally, if you see certain companies involved, it's probably good. So that definitely has my attention. So for me personally, I am super excited for this new Sonic movie. And it's because I've been a huge gamer since I was a kid. And boy, do they suck at making video game movies. Like really, really bad.
You do have a point there, yes.
And the first Sonic movie was fun. And I'm like, it's not a great movie, but this is great compared to everything else that they've adapted from a video game. And I've heard that this movie, there's definitely some issues, and it's 2 hours. Like, I don't feel like a Sonic movie needs to be 2 hours long. But apparently, like, especially the third act gets like full blown like Sonic video game, and I'm like, okay, I'm excited now.
I think they know their audience. They're probably going to make a full-blown movie with like, a fully realized plot, because they know they're making movies for people our age as much as anybody else, right? Because we were the ones who were playing Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah,
I'm just waiting on a Spyro the Dragon movie, personally.
That I would be down to see that too. I'm still waiting for when the hell they're going to make a Legend of Zelda movie. Like, I feel like,
oh, that's a big one though. Like, you can't mess that up. There would be a lot of pressure for a Zelda movie.
They probably would. But yeah, like, you would have a lot of people angry. Like, it would probably be Super Mario Brothers angry, because
Oh, it was
unless we
so
talk
bad.
about,
Oh, yeah, let's not, please.
no,
But
we
I
could
wasn't
talk
even a
about.
fan of the Ninja Turtles movies. Like when I was a kid, I didn't like them. I thought it was weird, creepy.
I watched Secret of the Ooze so much as a kid, like so much, and if like I remember, oh my god, they ruined Bebop and Rocksteady though. They were terrible.
Yeah.
And Super Shredder was Kevin Nash in the Shredder costume. That's why he's 7 feet tall.
Bebop and
Um,
Rocksteady were just they were like fodder though for the like we were never supposed to be really afraid of them, right? Like
no, and they obviously one was a wolf and one was a turtle.
uh a boar, like a wild boar, I think.
Well, no, in the movie
Oh, in the movies, right,
they were a
right,
wolf
right.
and a turtle. But like obviously in the comics and the cartoon, it's like one was like a warthog, like
A warthog.
boar. Yeah,
Yeah.
and what, a rhino?
Yeah, right. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Right.
Yeah, because like the Michael Bay produced Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies actually did make them that. I haven't seen the movies, so I'm not gonna speak to the quality of them. But
Credit where it's due, I guess, for Michael Bay. Yeah.
they even had Brad Garrett playing what's his name, the brain.
Oh, Krang.
Krang, yeah.
Yeah,
So they
Krang.
even did that. I'm like, well, at least they're going full blown. But like honestly, the only video game movie that I watch is the 95 Mortal Kombat because that movie
Yeah.
knows how dumb it is. And it is so dumb and silly. And then Annihilation was just unwatchable. Like,
I'm trying to think of a video game movie that was rewatchable.
so like, and like nobody's heard of this. And this is a really obscure video game adaptation, but I think in 2020 or 2021, Werewolves Within came out. And that's based off of like this online game that's basically mafia. You're trying to guess who in the crew's a werewolf or something like that. And like it's a really basic online game, but they turned it into a whole entire dark horror comedy.
Hmm.
And it was a lot of fun. I'm like, holy crap. But like it was based off of an idea. It wasn't
Right.
like a full blown adaptation of like a game with plot and stuff like that. It's funny
That
because I'm in the middle of watching the Halo show, and I'm like, this feels like it has the quality of a sci-fi channel original movie, and I'm just like, ugh. And also, there's you see Master Chief without his armor on more than you actually see him with it on, and there's not even that much action in it, which is kind of disappointing. But like the show, the pilot starts with like this full blown action sequence. I'm like, okay,
they
I
sucked
think I
you
could
in.
dig this. And
They
then
pulled you
since it's
in.
just like, where's that? Um, but video game movies are interesting, and I think this is going to be a fun time. So, but besides Cal, which has been getting a lot of rave reviews, I don't know how many things this weekend are really getting a whole lot of like people's attention for like being high quality cinema. Even the Michael Bay ambulance movie. So there you go.
It'll bring in some dollars at the box office, but as far as quality, I don't know.
Yeah,
Remains to be
Sonic's
seen.
definitely going to make some money this weekend.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But speaking of a movie that didn't make any money because it was dropped on Netflix and it's a documentary, is our feature of the week, which is Rolling Thunder Revue, which is a Bob Dylan story from Martin Scorsese. So, Jim, what were some of your general thoughts on the film?
So I do have some notes. And this was my second time viewing the film because the
Mhm.
first time I didn't finish it. Because I kind of caught on to, is it a documentary or a mockumentary is kind of the central question for me. All of my thoughts kind of hinge off of that, I think. Um, Big fan of Bob Dylan's music. It's
Hmm.
kind of a disclaimer, I guess. Big fan of the music, not a big fan of Bob Dylan himself or Robert Zimmerman, let's say. I'm a fan of
Hmm.
Bob Dylan, but not a fan of Robert Zimmerman, the real
Okay.
dude, right? So I enjoy the art, but I'm not a fan of the guy who made the art because he's screwed a lot of people over. He's seems kind of full of himself from what I've read about him. So it was interesting. The film was definitely interesting for me. The most interesting parts were the archival footage, the concert footage,
Yes.
the live stuff, the poetry. Um, more so. So here's the thing. I saw more of Bob Dylan, the poet, in this documentary, and I thought of him less as a rock star. I don't know how much of that was to the point of Scorsese, and the point is debatable. As I said, like I don't know if this is a prank or if this is a documentary film,
Hmm.
and I would love to hear what you have to say about that. But it was definitely interesting for me as like a window into Dylan at what some people would say is his peak.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting because like you could how I uh came at this film in a couple of different directions because like right off the bat it sets it up as feeling like this is like a legit documentary kind of thing where it's just like they show people in the streets and it's kind of looping in like the political landscape of the time and stuff like that. I'm like, is this going to be that kind of film? And this was my second time watching this. And the biggest thing that I remember from the first time watching was like it's scattered and it's not as focused. Like this definitely is not living in the material world. Like this is nowhere near the quality of documentary that was. I did appreciate this documentary more the second time I watched it, and I'm trying to think why that might be. But I do feel like it kind of strings in some threads that like did that really need to be there? And like did they really need to cuz like on some level, I don't think this film dug deep enough into the greater societal context of what was going on for them to warrant to spend that much time talking about it. And I'm like, you could have cut those scenes out and just kind of focus because, like, on some level, I think this film works better as a concert film than a general standard documentary because I do think the best scenes in this film are the performances. And it's not like it's like, here's a quick clip of them performing. No, they full blown play songs in the film. And it's interesting because it's like, to give a little context on my feelings about Bob Dylan, my brother is a huge Bob Dylan fan, like, loves his music. I'm a huge classic rock fan and I enjoy a lot of Bob Dylan's music. And it's the kind of thing where it's just like, I know some people are turned off by the folksy, like he started doing folk music. And then all the folk music fans got pissed off when he started using electric guitar. Uh like it was just like what? I remember that from a documentary I watched about the band because they were really close with Bob Dylan for a chunk of time. And like I've seen other things about Bob Dylan. But specifically, and like he has an interesting voice, let's just say. And honestly, I appreciated his music live in this documentary a lot because like there was a lot of passion in that performance and it kind of made me forget about how squeaky and weird his voice is. Like the one that really got me was the Hurricane. That was such a great performance, and that was probably the highlight of the movie for me. Was his performance that particular song. The white paint on his face was really distracting though. I'm like, what's he doing? Like, what's the point of this? It's like it was creepy. And he just seems like a weird dude, honestly. And this is gonna sound silly, but especially when he got older, I'm like, you know who should totally play an older Bob Dylan in a movie?
Jacob Dylan from the Wallflowers, also
Well,
his son.
it's funny because my mom's a huge Wallflowers fan, so I used to listen to that all the time growing up. And side note, not to go off on a tangent, great documentary, Echoes in the Canyon, which is all the interviews and investigating done by Jacob Dylan. And it's about the whole folk music scene in California around that time. So, side note, Adam Sandler, because he kind of looks like him.
Kinda. I haven't seen what's the serious turn for Adam Sandler? It was called
Uncut Gems.
Uncut. I haven't watched Uncut Gems yet.
Well, the first time I thought that he looked like Bob Dylan was 100% in Rain Over Me.
In which movie?
The Rain Over Me, that movie, that serious movie he does with like Don Cheadle, which was like mid 2000s, I think. That's just a side note. I thought that'd be interesting. I'm pretty sure Timothy Chalamet's playing Bob Dylan or something. So, because
I really like that concept.
everything.
What was the movie where like they had a whole bunch of maybe like a half dozen different actors?
Not There, something like that. I watched that.
I'm Not There. Was that it? I'm Not There.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like Kate Blanchett was Bob Dylan.
Oscar Isaac was Bob Dylan. No. Justin Timberlake was it? No, I'm thinking of Inside Llewyn Davis. Justin Timberlake was
Bob Dylan pops up
that movie. Yes, he does. But I like that concept because Bob Dylan, I feel like the mask thing, if I had to offer an answer to you on the whiteface thing, I don't think it's racialized. I think it's about performing from behind a mask. Like this whole Rolling Thunder Revue was kind of equally theater troupe and music.
Yeah.
In my view, right? So like in, I don't know, ancient Greece, in China, in Japan, they perform from behind a mask, right?
Yeah.
And at one point in the movie, he said, if somebody's not wearing a mask, they're going to lie to you. But if they're wearing a mask, they're going to tell you the truth. I can't decide if he was just fucking with me, excuse me, if he was just
we're adults
messing with the audience, or if he actually meant that. Like in Shakespeare or in a classic work of fiction or in a drama, like if it's a good fiction, it should have a little bit of truth, like human universal truth to it. I don't know if that's what he's going at or if he's just messing with the audience, because it would be very Robert Zimmerman to mess with the audience.
Like especially with the context of this performance, I feel like the wearing the mask kind of thing makes a lot of sense in like the performance standpoint, and that is the actual like, because I know the film spends some time talking to everybody in like the troupe, and I think one of the more interesting ones that I recall was she's playing violin or fiddle. I think like I thought that was interesting, her perspective on it, and like but you know, for the most part it's about Bob Dylan. And I feel like I'm trying to think when the credits rolled on this film, I felt like I didn't leave feeling as fulfilled as I left after I watched like George Harrison Living in the Material World. Like I felt like I knew who this man was. I felt like this movie was trying to do multiple different things, and none of them, except for maybe like the concert footage, fully well. Because it's just like it was scattered. This was, I would say, probably the messiest Scorsese movie next to like with Gangs of New York. Because like Gangs of New York is just trying to do way too many things.
Agreed.
But there's a lot of things that I absolutely love about that film. There's also some things that frustrate me beyond belief about that film. And I'm much more passionate about that film than this. Like I walked away watching this movie and being like, oh, like I would have liked to just watch the concert.
Yeah.
And like I'm sure Scorsese could have, and to go back to our conversation for when we were talking about the Rolling Stones Shine a Light, this is not Bob Dylan 40 years past his prime.
Right.
Like, this is Bob Dylan in it. And I think that's why it was so engaging as well to watch the performance, because like this was a man at his peak, similar to like The Last Waltz. Like, this is really high quality performance, and that's why it like captures so well. And Bob Dylan's one of the most iconic and prolific musicians, period. And this, you could tell, like, obviously Scorsese has such a passion for music, which is why he goes back to projects like this. And it makes a lot of sense that like you'd go to, because like I'm trying to think, like obviously it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to figure out like Rolling Stone songs that he's used in his movies. I'm trying to think if he's used any specific Bob Dylan songs that really stick out. And I'm probably gonna have to ponder that, because that's something I didn't really think about before going in here.
I was hoping you'd have a little bit of perspective on the Scorsese end of things. So I have a partial explanation to offer you as to why this is so messy.
Mhm.
And then I also have maybe a prompt on maybe some context you could provide, given you've semi recently watched all of Scorsese's films.
All since September.
Minus one.
Yes.
So I was just looking through IMDb reviews, because like after I watch a movie, I like to see it's kind of a mixed bag of emotions for me. So it was interesting to see that the IMDb crowd kind of mirrored my reactions. A lot of people hated it. Some people loved it. Seems like Scorsese nerds and Dylan nerds tend to like it the most.
Mhm.
And the one comment I want to call out here is that the one that says a vast improvement on Ronaldo and Clara. So apparently Dylan authorized a lot of the concert footage, the live stuff, and the conversations and things like that to happen with the idea of a fictional director in mind. And that was the Van Dorp character, who is actually not called Van Dorp. He's like Bette Midler's husband, or some guy who's in the industry. So like every time Dylan's talking to the camera through the tour, he has the idea of a fictional director putting together a documentary, and this movie Ronaldo and Clara was going to be put out, and it never happened, or it didn't. It was a flop or something. So he handed all of the archival footage to Scorsese and said, "Here you go." And Scorsese did his thing. So that might account for why this is so literally like head scratching. I'm literally scratching my head trying to make sense of it. But
well,
that
and
may
it's
be part of
interesting too, because I just looked up and saw that Scorsese mentioned that he hadn't spoken to Bob Dylan in 20 years. So like I don't know how long ago like he passed along this footage, because like obviously this footage is old. Like this is decades old footage. And like how long has this documentary been sitting in the pipeline, kind of thing? Because like this is based off of a Rolling Stone magazine interview. Like the original cut of Rolling Thunder Revue didn't feature any actors. So like this seems to be something that he's just been messing around with for a while.
Okay.
And that sounds very Scorsese. So, because the thing is, it's like, this is what's so interesting about this period in Scorsese's career, I think, post Wolf of Wall Street, is that everything since has been years in the making. He tried it 20 years to get money for Silence, and finally got it, and was finally able to make that film. The Irishman is notorious for being something that took so much trouble, because nobody would pay for him to de-age those actors. Which
They should have de-aged De Niro a little more, in my opinion. But I'm not going to say any more about that until you watch the movie.
Well, and for those who will tune into the next episode when I talk with Ethan about The Irishman, you're going to hear me talk a lot about how they should have just hired younger actors to play them when they were younger.
You're not wrong.
But
Wait,
I guess
so
Scorsese,
were Dylan and Scorsese, were they friends and then they kind of fell out of touch for 20 years, or like they spoke about this project and then it was on the back burner for 20 years?
let's see, was told. He said, last time I saw Dylan was at a big dinner for Armani 20 years ago. And this interview is from 2019.
Armani, huh?
And I met him a few times with Robbie Robertson.
Oh, okay.
That's about it. Because the thing is,
he did make the documentary about Robbie Robertson recently, right?
Well, so I wish Scorsese made that documentary about the band, because it might have been less like, I really enjoyed the documentary. That my biggest issue was like, it's one of those things where you could tell Robbie Robertson made this movie, because like it didn't necessarily put the greatest light on like Lee Von Helm and some of the other members of the band.
And his wife never even appeared, did she?
No, Robbie Robertson came out looking like a shining piece of gold at the end of the movie, and it's just like, yeah, because he made it. It's like Bohemian Rhapsody, because Brian May and Rod Taylor made that movie, and it wasn't their fault that it was all Freddie, and it's just like those kinds of things. But it's very interesting because Robbie Robertson has been working with Scorsese since The Last Waltz. He has been his music supervisor or executive music producer, whatever title he's had over the years. Robbie Robertson's the one who works with Martin Scorsese picking the music in the films, which makes a lot of sense too, because it's very much a lot of that music from that time. And like, I literally just did a video with my friend Robert from Sif Pop on. I have a little series that I'm trying to start up called All Time Greats. And I did one on Hitchcock, and then I did one on Scorsese, and we talked about reasons why Scorsese is one of the all-time greats. And he works with great people. He surrounds himself with great people. And Robbie Robertson's one of those ones behind the scenes. Like, he's the one who helped pick that music and making sure, like, I brought up Color of Money. There's one scene in that is just some of the most impeccably chosen song, Werewolves of London, with Tom Cruise going like all full-blown cocky showboating. It's in the way that you use it from Eric Clapton, which is like a big 80s Clapton song.
Right. I remember you brought that song up.
Yeah. And Robbie Robertson's been working with him ever since. And I'm not surprised that he met Bob Dylan through Robbie Robertson, because the band opened for Dylan for years.
Yeah, and they toured with him as the Hawks in his comeback, right? Like in '65, he went electric. As you said, the folk community basically ejected him. They were like, "We want nothing to do with you." The fans got really pissed off because Dylan was like a voice for the peace and love generation, and he went electric, right? So like for that 9-10 years or whatever it was, Dylan did his own thing. He was like so hurt by the rejection from the folk community and from his audience that he didn't tour until I think he went out with the band before they were the band. I think that might have been earlier. I think it was back in the 60s.
I'm trying to remember because it's either late 60s, early 70s specifically.
He might have been out on tour with the Hawks, who were going to become the band, when they got booed off stage. That's a really memorable scene for me from, I think it's No Direction Home, right? Like it opens up with him getting booed off stage with an electric band behind. I think that's the Hawks, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, from that point till this point, they're like almost a decade has gone by and Dylan didn't tour. So I feel like part of the prank, like he's very sarcastic, I feel like, in all of this. And I feel like it's directed at the audience that kind of rejected him or spurned him or however he saw. I think he was hurt really deeply by all that.
Well, and it's very interesting that you gave that context of like what maybe the original purpose of this footage was. And then it's odd trying to rework it as like a serious documentary about Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And maybe, and that could go a long way. And because that's the thing, it's like, it's hard to be like, you see these documentaries, these concert films coming out decades later, just like, why hasn't this seen the light of day? And I remember, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but Amazing Grace, I think it was the name of that Aretha Franklin church concert film that came out a couple of years ago, had been untouched for decades and never got to be released.
I never saw this one.
And it was reworked by like a famous director. But like, I'm thinking like, how did he direct this? Because it's the footage from like the 70s. But the thing is, he received the footage, reworked it and stuff like that, obviously.
Kind of like Questlove with Summer of Soul this past year.
Exactly.
Like that.
Because obviously Questlove was not there directing it.
No, he wasn't. So I don't even know if he was alive. Was he even born yet? I don't think so.
Probably not.
I don't think he was.
He looks good for his age if he was. So, because the thing is, it's like, and that's exactly this, because like this particular situation, I guess it wouldn't potentially be out of the realm of possibility that Scorsese did direct this in 1975, because like he was directing things, but he didn't. He was given this footage, and which is why this is coming out so much later. And I guess that's the thing too. It's like if you're a director, no matter how great a director you are, and you're being given footage and with odd context to it, and you try to rework the purpose of it, it's not going to come out perfect. And like this film's far from perfect. It's definitely feels like Scorsese's trying to accomplish something that, like, I don't feel like all the pieces are there to really accomplish it. And like he doesn't go full blown like, how does Bob Dylan fit into the greater context of things, but then still spend scenes trying to set up like the political landscape of things, but like not enough for it to really mean something or be interesting. And then you spend all this time talking about Dylan and the other people involved in his performance, and then you have the performance. So it's trying to compete on those different levels.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you in that there isn't really a satisfying conclusion, because with the context of Nixon and Vietnam and the bicentennial, they keep coming back to the bicentennial, right? I'm going to come back to Ginsburg in a second, but I feel like the question is being asked like what is America in 1976, because it's the bicentennial, right? Like, what is America and who is America, and like what does all this mean? To me, Ginsburg is more relevant as he's more of a key to the answer to that question than Dylan is. A lot of people would probably disagree, because Dylan is the star of the show and he's a great poet. Obviously, he's a genius, right? And his music has influenced everybody. Didn't they give him a Nobel Prize a couple of years ago for poetry?
I think so.
I think they did, for literature. Sorry,
yeah,
for his poetry in literature. To me, Ginsburg has more relevant things to say in this footage than Dylan does. And that makes sense to me, because if Dylan was trying to make a mockumentary or kind of a prank, whatever, Ginsburg is just giving his honest poetry. And I don't know, that just felt to me much more important. Every time Ginsburg took the screen, I kind of wanted to hear what he had to say. I enjoyed Dylan's songs, but like I felt like Ginsburg really was what was his they called him the prophet of something or other, the oracle. They called him the oracle in the movie, right? Yeah, he was. I felt like he should have been the star of the show, personally.
Well, and I was about to say, I think what you're bringing up, Jim, especially, is like this could have been two separate movies. Like it could have been It could have just been a Bob Dylan concert film. And then it could have been like if you wanted to tell the story of like context of America and like why wouldn't Scorsese? That seems like something exactly Scorsese would want to do. And that's right up the alley of like a project that came out right after this, which is that Fran Lebowitz series on Netflix that he did, where he interviews his friend Fran Lebowitz, who's an author and a big like New York socialite, and she talks of like basically it's her giving her perspective on the city and our society and stuff like that, and feel like Scorsese would have loved to make something like that. I just feel like it was trying to kill two birds with one stone, and you only hit the birds with like a piece of the stones, and then they just kind of flew away.
Right, right. He picked up. It's like when you make a snowball and it falls apart in your hand, and as you throw it, it just flies everywhere.
Yep. And like, because the thing is, like, I'm not going to say this film doesn't have a lot of ideas and potential things that it could have dug deeper on. And the thing is, like, I don't know if you wanted to really do something that bold, like, and this is on Netflix, make it a series instead
Ooh,
of
I
just
like
like,
that. Yeah, I like that idea a lot.
because like if you're trying to cram too many things into a short, like a feature film length project, and it's a Netflix thing anyway, could have just expanded upon it. And I I don't know how you might feel about this or other people might feel about this, but like God, I wish they cut that Beatles Get Back thing into more than three pieces.
Oh, I still haven't seen Get Back, and I will at some point in my life, but I haven't watched it yet, so I can't really offer an opinion.
I felt like that would have, because I'm like, I'm gonna watch this whole episode, and then it's like 3 hours long, and I'm like,
Over Thanksgiving weekend, right? I think you
yeah.
told me. Yeah.
I watched that whole thing that weekend, and I'm like, oh, this is a little bit too much of the Beatles.
This could have been, yeah, this could have been 4 or 5 episodes, I think. Apparently there are like a bunch of fictional characters. He could have put in one fictional character for each episode. It could have been 45 minutes to an hour long. Um, so the Van Dorp character made me feel, I thought I was watching like a Taika Waititi film or something like that. You know, it had that kind of a feel to it.
Mhm.
That could have worked. Yeah, if you broke it up into 4 or 5, maybe even 6 different episodes. But knowing Scorsese as you do now, I mean, if he'd started down that road, where would that end? You know, if he started thinking 6 episodes, it's going to become 12, right?
And that's an interesting thing too, because like in general, he's mostly a feature film director. And like I'm pulling up his IMDb because like I'm still confused on why that because like Alex brought up that other Bob Dylan documentary and he's like, why didn't you do this one? I'm like, IMDb didn't have it on there as one of his films. I'm like, I'm still confused about that. On like why that wasn't there.
Was it No
Or
Direction Home? Maybe he just
yeah,
had a hand in producing or something
well
like
no,
that.
I looked it up and it said he directed it. What it could have been is I did have to trim out some of his films because I
Okay.
couldn't find them to watch anywhere. But apparently that was on Netflix. Like Scorsese has a mini series coming out about Theodore Roosevelt. So that's coming out apparently this year. And he also has in
Who's playing Theodore
production,
Roosevelt in that? Does it say?
I think it might be a documentary.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Cool. I'll watch that.
but this says in development Roosevelt biopic Leo playing Theodore Roosevelt, and I'm like, no,
No, I don't see it. I don't
I
see
don't
it
see
at
that
all.
either. But Pretend It's a City is that series that he did with Fran Lebowitz.
You're right.
He's launched a couple of series. So like Boardwalk Empire, Vinyl, like he directed like the first episode.
Big
And
fan of
then
Boardwalk Empire. Oh, and then he just walked away from it. Is that what happened after that?
I think he produced it along the way, but he only directed the first episode.
When you're as big as Marty is, you probably can, get it written into a contract that your name's going to be on there for however many episodes. You probably don't have to do anything.
Yeah, because I'm looking here, beside that Fran Lebowitz Pretend It's a City, he has never directed more than one episode of the series.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, it's the same deal as like Fincher with House of Cards. Fincher directed the first episode of House of Cards and then kind of just like let it sail on its own.
He blessed the concept, and then I feel like Scorsese has to do a project and close it and wash his hands of it, or else he's gonna just sit on it and gnaw it to splinters. He's just gonna keep editing and editing and adding and driving himself crazy with it. So he's got to walk away, after.
Probably not as bad as Ridley Scott though. Because how many different versions of his movies can he possibly come out with? Blade Runner, like
a fair question.
4 different versions of it. But I wonder if we'll get any other versions of House of Gucci.
Oh, I didn't even see the first one. I'm staying away from House of Gucci.
Maybe he'll come out with a trimmed version of it. I was gonna make a joke about maybe with no Jared Leto in it, but you can't just take him out of the movie. That's such a strange movie. But I feel like, in the context of things, I find it so interesting that this came out like 2019. Like, why? And I guess it might have been like, was this like Scorsese had the time finally to like work on this project, because this is his follow-up to Silence, which he released 3 years before this.
Yeah, is he just going through his back catalog and trying to finish unfinished projects, or was there a timely reason to release this, is the question, right? I'd say my guess would be the first one.
Yeah, and it could be like, I'm thinking in the context of where he was in his career right now, it could have been like, hey, all this time messing around with trying to find money for The Irishman, work on something. And could have been because they came out the same year, both on Netflix, 2019. Rolling Thunder Review and The Irishman.
Yeah, find work. And it seems like he does have some genuine affection for not just the time period, but the music. He really seems to love the music of the late 60s, early 70s. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I looked up that Theodore Roosevelt miniseries, and it's premiering May 30th, and there's actual footage of
it. Really?
Intriguing. He directed 1 episode out of 2. There's 2, I think 2 episodes. It says it's a 2-part series on U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt, looking at his work as a progressive reformer, as well as his contradictions, such as being a passionate conservationist who also hunted animals. And Rufus Jones played Theodore Roosevelt. I don't recognize any of the cast.
I was thinking of Sean Penn playing Andrew Jackson. That was the miniseries that I was trying to think of a second ago. But I'm surprised. Leo's progressive. I can see why he'd have some, attraction to the role of Roosevelt.
Let's just hope it doesn't turn into J. Edgar.
We can only hope.
Well, at least it's not Clint directing it, though. Because I was literally just having this conversation too about like, it's so interesting because like Scorsese is still going out there and making things like Silence and The Irishman. And then you have people like Clint, who is just churning out mediocre movies every year. Because like, that's where he is at his point. And like Scorsese's still like trying to like pick strong projects and really passionate projects and stuff like that. Not that Clint's not passionate about the projects that he's doing. It's just, and I don't think anybody's ever going to argue that Clint Eastwood is as good a director as Martin Scorsese. So, at least I'm not.
No, I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to touch it either.
But I guess, Jim, do you have any other specific thoughts, prompts, questions about Rolling Thunder review?
Yeah, for you specifically, I have.
Okay.
Let me hit you with one more question before we wrap up here. Um, okay. So the short film at the beginning of the movie, you may have completely forgotten it. There's a black and white film from like it's like pre-turn of the century. It's like 19th century, 1800s.
Yeah.
Apparently, the illusionist in that movie is the inspiration for Hugo. And having seen Hugo and loving Hugo as you do, because I had no idea why the movie started out that way. No idea. I was completely baffled. It went
Well,
from
and
that to like 1976 America. What's going on, Shane?
I, the funny thing is, I was even confused about the first actual scene, which is like, how's this have to do with the rest of this movie too? And I think that's just a thing. I really don't know what the focus of this movie is supposed to be. And like, it doesn't surprise me somebody that's so passionate about film to include like a little Easter egg like that. And I don't know if it's supposed to be like, look at the magic of cinema. Like, I took all this old footage and turned it into a movie. Like, good for you, because you magically made this movie appear. Um, well, after some things that you said, thinking about illusions, maybe he is trying to hint at us, like, maybe this isn't exactly what you think it is.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm think I'm overthinking it or looking too deeply into it.
Yes, yes. That's perfect. That brings me to my final thought. My final thought of the movie, I took a quote from about 1 hour and 42 minutes into the movie. I think it's
Mhm.
just a touch before that. Dylan is talking to Joan Baez, who basically got him started. She was a star. She brought him along on tour, and he got
Yep.
huge and eclipsed her. And then he dumped her like soon after. But because Joan Baez is a class act, they stayed friends. Obviously, she's even interviewing for the movie with Martin Scorsese in 2018 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
He says to her, "Thought will fuck you up. It's heart. It's not head. It's heart. It's not head. Don't think about the movie too much. It's all about the feelings and what Dylan is creating. It's all about the artistic process. Don't think about it too much, or you're just going to keep running." That's what I got from that point in the movie with all the questions that I had.
He Nolaned us
Yeah, exactly.
right out of Tenet.
Exactly.
Don't think about it, just feel it.
Yeah.
Like, screw you, Nolan. Don't tell me what to do.
That's my takeaway from this movie. Don't think
And
about it too much.
you know what, Jim? I think that's why I enjoyed this more the second time. I think because when I left the movie the first time watching, and um, when I watched it the first time, I watched it in the context I'm going to review this for my channel and do the whole thing, and I'm like, movie's a mess. And like trying to really think about, I'm like, for this context, and when I do these shows, and like, I decided I wasn't going to write an article about this for my Wasteland Vintage Roadshow because I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'll go back to it. I feel like I'm going to wind up writing more that's not about the actual movie, but like maybe the context of like thinking about it and what it made me think about. Because like, it's interesting because some documentaries can do that to you. And here's a perfect example. I watched a documentary, my friend Kevin and I hung out, and he's like, maybe we could go see a movie. I'm like, here's some movies out. And we picked the Automat. And it's a documentary about the old Automat restaurant chain that was in Philly and New York City, and it was iconic. It's so funny because I wrote a review about it, and my mom saw me post about it on Facebook and talked about how commented that like my grandma and grandpa used to take them as like a treat because like they were originally from Kensington, and so like they were from Philly. And by the end of the film, it was like it's a pretty standard documentary, but what really elevated it was because Mel Brooks was involved.
Hmm.
And Mel Brooks, it even got a little meta because even when she's interviewing Mel Brooks, he's like, use me. I'm a big star. I can sell this. I'll make you a song. Sell the movie. And like over the credits, he sings a song called The Automat, which is like an ode to his love for this old place that him and Carl Reiner used to go to all the time when they were writing together, working on Sid Caesar's show in New York and stuff like that. So like, but what it made me think of, it's like beyond the film was, I don't feel like we have anything like that. Like, I don't have anything where it's just like, I have such fond memories of going to this restaurant and this meaning so much to people and being a cultural thing. And like in the movie, they're like, what's the only thing we could think of? And it keeps coming to the guy who met at Starbucks. And he's like, oh, the Automat inspired me. I'm like, oh, you know, this inspired you, the restaurant for the people, as you charge like $8 for a cup of coffee. So I'm like, I don't buy that. But the thing is, like, it made me think of like, I wish that I had this kind of connection, or like I knew a company that I could feel so invested in because I knew they cared so much about people. And it made me think about all these other things. And sometimes a film can do that, where it's just like somehow it sparks something in you that makes you really want to talk about like some small thread from it and go off on it. Because like I don't think I could write like 4 pages about this movie. I think I would struggle to write like a page about this movie. Be like, well, I like the performances. And like, and that is exactly why I feel like I enjoyed this more. Because when I just sat and thought about when I finished this movie, I'm like, those are some great performances. And it got in my head like I wish it was just a concert film, because I think this would have been an incredible concert film because it has such great footage and everything. But in the end, still think this is a bit of a mess. And I'm going to do a special episode of my talk show with just myself ranking all the Scorsese movies that I've watched. And this is definitely at the bottom. Like this, Boxcar Bertha, like just chilling there together at the bottom.
Really, Boxcar Bertha? You hated it that much, huh?
Well, here's the thing. I don't think I hate any of his movies. And that's a testament to Scorsese. It's like, well, Boxcar Bertha is like definitely at the bottom for me, is because I legitimately loved like 90% of these movies that I watched of his. I'm just like, and that's just a testament to Scorsese, I think. And I have to put in a lot of thought into this list that I'm probably going to be working on it this weekend, because like I might even have to rethink like, did any of them change my mind on what my favorite is? Because Taxi Driver has been my number one for years, been my number one Scorsese. But certain films have definitely jumped up higher. Like I don't know, this whole entire experience watching Color of Money again, and I wound up writing a whole entire companion article about that and The Hustler together, that it really sparked my love for it. And like The Last Waltz is something that I love so much.
And if you watched all the movies again in like 10 years, you know, the list might change again. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, because like it's funny because I remember watching Raging Bull for the first time and hating it. I was 16. I'm like, this is just 2 angry Italian guys yelling the F word at each other for 2 hours.
I didn't like the dialogue the first time I saw Raging Bull. I remember that. I didn't like the dialogue at all.
And like watching it, which Joe got so upset with me the first time I told him I hated Raging Bull, because that's literally his favorite movie.
Right. And I know this now.
Yeah. And then I rewatched and I made him so happy when I told him, it's like, I loved it a lot more this time. He's like, yes. And you know Joe well enough now from doing our podcast together. Like Joe gets very excited.
I can picture his reaction. Yeah. Did you ever do like a, I don't know, a companion piece for On the Waterfront? Did you ever like compare the two?
Oh, you know what? So now we're going on a bit on a tangent, but because like obviously a companion thing to Welcome to the Wasteland has turned into my article series called Wasteland Vintage Roadshow for Scribe Magazine, because originally I had just been writing articles about movies celebrating anniversaries. So like I did a whole bunch of films, like I did personal ones like Lord of the Rings and Shrek celebrated their 20th anniversaries.
Mhm.
The Searchers celebrated its like 75th or something crazy like that,
Oh my God.
or 65th, something like that. And I was doing all of that. And then I'm like, when I started doing all these Scorsese films, I'm like, but what if instead of writing to celebrate these anniversaries, I just went along with this? Because it also saved me having to watch an extra movie every weekend, to be
And there you
perfectly
go.
honest, too.
Right.
So there's a practical aspect of it, too. And like, I'm probably going to continue it doing Spielberg. And a lot of those, like, oh, I'm going to have so much fun writing about The Last Crusade. Because like, that's like one of my fondest movie watching experiences growing up as a kid, was watching Indiana Jones. And I'm super excited about that. And especially Jurassic Park too, and having the context now of all the other films that have come after it, and just appreciating how special that first one was, because
Yeah.
it's like, because now we've seen how those could go wrong so many times now.
It'll
And it's
be
just like,
funny. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they hold up. Like, you can probably separate nostalgia at this point from, left
I
brain,
have
right
no
brain, or whatever.
nostalgia for Jurassic Park 3. That is just like a soulless 90-minute monster movie.
I don't even remember Jurassic 3. I think that was my first makeout in a theater, and I don't have any. I just remember what's the name of the that lead actor?
Sam Neill.
Sam Neill. Yeah, I remember Sam Neill, and I remember some dinosaurs, and that's about it. That's all I remember from
The
Jurassic.
weird scene where his partner's like, Alan, except he's a velociraptor on the airplane, and that's just like a dream. And it's just like, what
Like,
was
why?
that? But going back to your point, I would love to write about On the Waterfront, because that's one of my favorite films.
Oh, good.
I am a huge fan of that film, and that is top notch acting. Like, you have Brando, Ava Marie Saint, Carl Malden, Lee J.
Brando at his
Cobb.
best, not just Brando, but Brando in his prime.
Yep. Oh, Lee J. Cobb is Johnny Friendly. And was it, is it Rod Steiger plays his brother Charlie? I'm pretty sure, years
That
before In the Heat of the Night. Yeah.
sounds good. If you say it with enough
And
confidence, I'll agree with you.
he's just like, what are you doing to me, Charlie? It's like, I
Mm.
could have been somebody, could have been a contender. And like, it's so funny. Next time we hang out, when we're doing our podcast for adaptation, we have to randomly ask Matt to do his Brando impression.
Oh, done. Yeah, I'll ask him. The first time I heard that quote was on Muppet Treasure Island. I didn't know what it was from.
I just rewatched that
I love
recently.
that movie so much.
Yeah, because it's the ball guy who's like, I could have been a contender.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm using this to segue into our recommendations, because I didn't actually have that one on my list, but I have recently rewatched it. If you haven't seen Muppet Treasure Island, that is such a fun time. The songs in it are a blast. We have Cabin Fever. The just one particular, like, when you get a chance to hear Tim Curry do a musical number in a movie, it's always a blast.
Tim Curry is
Professional
my
Pirate.
Long John Silver.
Yes, Long John Silver. And Polly is a lobster. And favorite quote from the whole entire movie is like, who in their right mind hired this crew? Are you telling me that your finger hired the crew? It's like, no, silly. The man inside my finger hired the crew. Just like,
Oh, okay.
Fozzie. Fozzie is such an idiot, but he's so funny.
And I just caught on to the fact that Brando's wearing makeup in a lot of on the waterfront. The guy that does that quote in Muppet Treasure Island, he's got makeup on. His eyes are blacked out, which is a it's a very subtle thing that I wouldn't
Yeah.
ever have noticed until just now.
But so there's one recommendation. So Jim, what's your recommendation for the people
Oh,
out there?
right. So I'll bring us full circle back to Sonic the Hedgehog, kind of. So there was a YouTube webisode made by a little company called Rocket Jump back in, I don't know, early 20 aughts. I mean, no, early 2010s, sorry. Early 2010s, I think. And it's called Video Game High School. So if you just type into YouTube VGHS, there are 3 seasons of this. The fun thing for you, Shane, might be that
Mhm.
the dude, Freddie Wong, I think, is the guy behind Rocket Jump. He was in film school or freshly out of film school when he made this. So there's a lot of like Easter eggs and
Mhm.
homages to classic film or like uh trivia around classic film. The story is that instead of a classic high school with like the jocks and the losers or the nerds, right?
Mhm.
The first person shooter players are kind of like the jocks. They all play video games. The social media gamers are the losers, the outcasts, but they're all nerds. Every
They all
every
play
single
Candy
person in the
Crush.
high school, they're all nerds. Um, the effects are really cool. The storylines are kind of fluffy and not too serious and really easy to watch. I really enjoy it. It was a nostalgia punch for me. I just rewatched it like, I don't know, a week or two ago. So, Video Game High School on YouTube.
I'm looking
Um,
at it right now.
Excellent. And if you ever do a review, Shane, call me up. I'd love to talk about this a
So
little.
when you know what, I'm gonna put this on my list to watch, and we could do an episode of my talk show.
Fantastic.
I'm definitely down. I'm adding this to my list. I I'll put this after I was catching up on that animated spin-off show that they made of the boys present Diabolical.
Oh,
It's like
I didn't know this was a thing. I love the
it's
boys.
eight 14-minute animated episodes.
Okay. And it's called
And
Diabolical.
yeah, the first episode reminded me of like the Animaniacs, honestly.
Oh
And
God.
like it's still created by Evan Goldberg and Seth Rogen. So like you could tell. Uh but when I do finish watching Video Game High School, we'll set up a time to actually talk about it because I'd be down.
Cool.
It was so funny because I was just having this conversation about like social media games because my graduate assistant got me hooked into Wordle now.
Oh, Wordle. Oh no.
I was very proud of myself. I got my word in 3 shots today.
Oh, excellent. Good for you.
Um, so I'll definitely watch that. Now, my recommendation that I actually had in my show notes. So I had two of them, and one is Better Nate Than Ever, and this is a new musical on Disney Plus, and it's about a young boy who loves Broadway. He's from Pittsburgh, and him and his best friend, who's basically his hype man, they hop on a bus when his parents are away on a long weekend together. And he hops on a bus to New York City to try out for Lilo and Stitch, the musical.
Is Lilo and Stitch the musical an actual thing?
No, and I
Oh,
found out that it wasn't. I was disappointed. But
it
like,
should.
this is a Disney thing, so they're like, it's like I'm crossing my fingers that they kind of actually make that because I would definitely go to New York City to see that. So like he's trying out for this, and it's I wrote in my review of it that it sparked like a small hidden Broadway kid in me because like it took me until like I was well into adulthood to really fall in love with like Broadway musical shows and stuff like that. And pre-COVID, I had been going at least a couple times a year. That like Matt went with me twice. Matt went to go see A Bronx Tale with me, which De Niro adapted to a musical and directed on Broadway.
Really?
And
You directed the musical.
yep.
Huh. Okay.
And then School of Rock got adapted into a musical. It's like, I enjoyed the guy in it. It's not Jack Black, but nobody else.
Nobody's Jack Black. Jack Black is the only.
Jack Black is a whole entire other thing in himself. But like, I have fun with it, and this is such an endearing and cute film, and they have great musical numbers in it too, and like really catchy music. A lot of like the narrative stuff's pretty tropey and like standard. Like nothing's gonna surprise you about the film. But like Ruby Wood, who plays Nate, is a star, and he's gonna be a star, and I'm sure Disney is gonna make a lot of money off of it.
Okay.
So
if I know Disney, they will figure out a way.
Yeah. So I would not be surprised if I see young Mr. Wood popping up in a whole bunch of other Disney Plus original things. But like, this is just a sweet, fun little movie, and I really enjoyed it. Now, one of the movies I did check off my watch list was The Phantom of the Paradise, which is Brian De Palma's mid-70s adaptation of Phantom, except it's like a rock opera kind of
Oh, no, thank you. What did you think? Was it good?
I had a blast with it. It's like, it's funny because my brother turned out to really love it, and I'm not surprised because my brother's a humongous Rocky Horror fan, and like this just has that cultish rock opera vibe to it, like Tommy and Rocky Horror and stuff like that. It has that vibe to it, and also very violent. This is De Palma, so you could definitely feel the De Palma in it, because like I think this was his last film before Carrie.
Okay.
So like Carrie really launched his career in, I think, 75. And I'm not the hugest De Palma fan. I'm not a huge fan of Scarface, to be honest. Like I just think
I'm not a huge Scarface fan.
I think Scarface is just too much. And like, especially now, watching Al Pacino play a Cuban is so weird. And so weird. But one of my favorite films in my top 25 favorite films is a De Palma film, and it's The Untouchables. I am a huge...
The Untouchables, early 90s, right? The Untouchables.
I think the very late 80s, but yeah, close to early 90s. And
Costner, right? It was
Costner, Connery, De Niro. De Niro as Al Capone, doing his best, over the top Italian gangster. And
he's doing an impression of himself basically in that movie, right?
Well, and he is larger than life, and De Palma knows how to shoot him larger than life too. Oh my God. And it's like, you're nothing but talking a badge. And I just love it. It's like, I want him dead. I want his family dead. I want his house burned to the ground, and I'm gonna piss on all the ashes. And just like, De Niro is having so much fun in this movie. And like, it's early Costner, and like, I don't know if he's like the strongest of the actors in the film, but like, it's Sean Connery in one of his best roles. A young Andy Garcia is great in it.
Right, Andy Garcia. You can't forget about Andy Garcia.
Even Billy Drago as Needy, just a despicable piece of crap in that movie. But so Phantom of the Paradise is a crazy rock opera version of Phantom of the Opera, and I think it has more in common with the Universal Studios version of Phantom that came out in the 40s with Claude Rains in it than it does the Lon Chaney one that's more closely adapted to the book. So like, there's different motivations in the Claude Rains version, where they steal his music, and that's why he wants revenge. That's exactly what happens in this kind of thing. And there's a lot of great music in it. It's just ridiculous. And it also adapts a lot of ideas from other literature, like Portrait of Dorian Gray. They take elements from, especially for like one particular aspect of the film. It's a crazy, crazy movie. And if you want like a crazy time with like a lot of crazy music in it, it's I think it's one of those kinds of things where you definitely have a lot of fun watching this with your friends. Okay. And you definitely have even more fun watching it with your friends if you're slightly intoxicated. And that's coming from a completely sober person. So
right.
Like this is definitely something I'd be like, Alex, have a beer. I think you can have fun with this.
I think Alex was the one who introduced me to the beer system. Instead of stars, it's how many beers does it take to enjoy this film? And I've used that numerous times now. I saw Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. It was my first and only Broadway show. So it would be interesting to see another take on it.
Yeah, I saw Phantom on Broadway. I did a special episode of my interview show with my friend Paige because she was over. We double featured the Lon Chaney Phantom and the 2004 Andrew Lloyd Webber adapted.
Yes.
Why am I blanking? Who made Batman and Robin? The director.
There's a reason that we are forgetting the name of the story.
And the thing is, like, he's made some like, I love A Time to Kill, that Todd Grisham film that he made, and I think Phone Booth's a solid movie. I just feel bad. I'm completely blanking on his name, and I'm looking it up right now because
I didn't watch Phone Booth.
Joel Schumacher, who recently had passed away too. He passed away within the past couple of years.
Oh, see, now I feel bad.
So Joel Schumacher directed in 2004 Phantom with Gerard Butler's The Phantom, yes, and Emmy Rossum and Patrick Wilson. So like I've seen a lot of Phantom of the Opera adaptations.
I'll have to check out this. I've seen Paige's name on your updates. I don't think I've ever seen you guys collaborate. So I'll have to look up The Phantom because I have some strong opinions on I have 4 sisters. So like I have strong opinions about this female in Phantom of the Opera, and they're not good, but that's for another time.
That's the thing. I'm never going to argue in a positive way that movie has depth in those characters.
Fair.
Rao or Christine.
Yeah.
No. And then also the relationship's pretty problematic. It's just, I love the music.
Yes, very much so.
And everybody loves the music, and people forget, like, oh, this is really messed up.
The music's great.
This is really messed up. But Jim, thank you as always for coming on. And I really enjoy having you on these episodes, you and Alex, when like get to talk about music and stuff like that in another context too. I don't think Spielberg has any music related movies except for West Side Story, I guess. Because
did he do the recent reboot of West Side Story?
Yep.
I haven't seen it, but it was apparently really good. So
I loved it.
I'll probably watch it with one of my sisters at some point. Yep. I'll save it for that time.
But yeah,
But yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you. I wouldn't have watched this movie again if not for you. And it helps to bounce ideas off of somebody and talk out what the heck, especially with a movie like this, like what the heck's going on. So thanks for having me.
If you all out there like that, you should check out the Development Hell podcast with our movie club, which we're going to be watching Adaptation next. And I'm ready to cage or uncage. Which also, quick side note, I got to see The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent last night because I got an early screening, and it was exactly what I wanted to be, and all the Nick Cage craziness.
Excellent. So, are we still dressing up in costume for? We'll do it in the group chat, I guess.
Oh, I'll have to think about what cage would I want to be. And we're going to leave you all on that note. But thank you all out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.